Then platinum got really popular really fast, and yet nobody knew how to machine it, because even though in our heads we think, oh, it's platinum, it's a hard material, we put it on our fingers, no big
Yeah,
deal. Well, guess what? It's not hard. It's
yeah.
actually soft and full of gritty materials that tear apart diamond tools. So, oh my gosh, we have all of these older machines. How do we adapt to this?
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Most manufacturers started their businesses as they were good at making parts. They grew primarily because of word of mouth with very little investment in marketing and automation. They might be sitting on a pile of inventory and legacy machines due to their lack of understanding of how to invest in modern technology and processes. They might also lose on the opportunities if they might not be able to meet the consumer demand due to the limitations in their capabilities. But why are manufacturers so afraid of innovation? Is the fear real, or is it primarily because of their unwillingness to move out of their comfort zone? In today's episode, our guest, Tony Gunn, shares his insights on what manufacturers need to do to move out of their comfort zone. He also discusses how the iterative process to replace legacy machines with the new CNC machines can result in tapping into newer designs for consumer-centric industries. Finally, he discusses the need for innovation even for companies that might not be in the consumer-centric industries. Let me introduce Tony to you. Tony Gunn has over 20 years of experience in the machining and manufacturing industry. He has had the immense pleasure of traveling to over 50 countries to learn how business is conducted on a global scale. He is currently focused on MTD CNC, a market leader for video content creation and a one-stop shop for your marketing needs, including podcasts, technical corners, web design, email marketing, special offers, customer testimonials, as well as digital and print magazines. He is passionate about bringing the next generation of kids and their parents to get excited about manufacturing once again. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey, Tony, welcome to the show.
Hello, hello. How are you, sir?
I am doing wonderful, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to host a superstar of manufacturing. My audience is going to be blown away with the insight that you are going to offer for the manufacturing community. Thank you so much for being here.
You're making my head too big. I hope I can live up to those generous words.
You will, you will. I mean, you were born to be a superstar. All right. So just to kick things off, do you want to start with your personal story and current focus, Tony?
Yeah, well, my personal story could start on so many adventures. I am a unique character in the world as a human being, not even getting into the manufacturing side of things. I've always been kind of a troublemaker, somewhat stubborn. I've had to adapt to life in many ways to go, well, it can't always be my way all the time, can it? So I've learned a lot about patience through the roller coaster ride and trial and error. And I don't know how far back you'd like me to go, Sam, but certainly growing up, I had no real path other than thinking, hey, I'm probably going to be a professional soccer player. Okay. That's definitely what most people can do on this planet, right? It's definitely not a small majority of excellent athletes. Anyone can do it. you know. Obviously, I'm being very, very sarcastic. But growing up, man, there wasn't, other than just thinking I was going to be a professional athlete, I had no real direction. I had a lot
Yep.
of joy. I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of passion for sure, but no real direction in my life. And the journey that we're going to talk about today, I'm excited to talk about. And I think it's going to be mostly about manufacturing and manufacturing objectives and goals and hardships and bottlenecks and troubles and the perspective of a CEO perspective. And I've had opportunities to be like that, but also I can take it from really starting off at the bottom of that bucket with all the other crabs trying to do the best we can.
Okay, amazing story there and amazing background. And obviously, when you are a troublemaker, you are actually going to go very far because you are actually willing to make mistakes that not a lot of people are willing to do that. So good for you that you were trying different things, and that's how we all learn. Nobody is going to have all of the expertise. But as you know, our community is going to be slightly more of the financial people, operational people, and the CEOs. And these guys are going to be slightly more number driven. They don't have as much time. So they are looking for your insights in terms of how they can be better in their roles, in their job. What can they do? So one of the standard questions that we ask every single guest, Tony, is going to be your perspective on business growth.
Well, let me take one step back when you mentioned the advice or what people want to hear, how they can make themselves better as CEOs
Yep.
or anyone else who may end up tuning into this, because I know your podcast is very popular, Sam. And I think you mentioned it about being that stubborn troublemaker that often went through failures, right? And if we have the courage to step out of our comfort zone, if we have the courage to fail,
Yep.
it is not easy in the middle of the moment, but it is by far the greatest teacher that any of us can have. And if we go through life smooth sailing, if we go through life, everything is easy, I would make the discussion, most people say, I would argue, but I don't like to argue. I would like to have the discussion that if that's the case, we haven't pushed ourselves far enough, deep enough, wide enough in order to create real opportunities for ourselves. If we're constantly keeping those blinders on because maybe we already know the answers or maybe we know the path, and I put no in parentheses because nobody knows everything. We just temporarily think that we do until we realize we know enough to know that we don't know anything at all. And then we get to that point where we can really dive into all circumstances on a broad scale, regardless of the position that we're in and regardless of the CEO or high level of intelligence situation we're in. It can be applied to any aspect of business we do in the world. So whether that be in the manufacturing world and marketing world that I'm in, or whether that be the natural tea company that I own and hanging out with those people, whether it be in finance, which a lot of people are in banking, or whatever aspect of the industry we're in, we need to have the courage to spread ourselves into the areas where all the good stuff happens. One of my favorite little, and nobody can see me, I don't think, maybe they will, but one of my favorite little memes is there's this small circle that says the comfort zone and the cliche statement of nothing grows in the comfort zone, right? And then there's this huge circle off to the right-hand side that says where all the good stuff happens. And that's way outside of that comfort zone. But the great thing about that expansion, honestly, is the further we expand outside of the comfort zone, the further we expand our comfort zone. The comfort zone actually grows the further and further we leave it.
Okay, amazing. And love the meme, by the way. I mean, that's something that I should always have in front of my desk and that I recommend that everybody should be having in front of their desk. But from the practical perspective, as the operational people, as the financial people, we need to be slightly more practical in the way we approach things. So, we have two extremes. One is, financial, people typically they like to stick to the comfort zone. They are slightly more risk averse because they need to sign the check, right? When you assign the check, you are not going to be dreaming. You are going to be thinking that, okay, this is the money coming out from my pocket. So how am I going to investing? Is it the right decision for me or not? So they tend to be slightly conservative, and they probably are going to stay in their comfort zone unless they understand there are real opportunity to step out of their comfort zone. So they require that conviction, right? But any smart financial executive, they are always willing to explore if there are going to be any opportunities. But in most cases, from my personal experience, when I talk to any of the executives, it's always that, how to go from point A to point B. So obviously, in today's conversation, we were going to talk about, let's say, the precision manufacturing. So let's connect the dots here. So you spoke the comfort zone. So if we talk about the comfort zone of the precision manufacturers and what they could be doing today. So let's go back in time, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years back, and maybe you want to paint the picture of the comfort zone of the precision manufacturer, what kind of mistakes they were making 5 years back, 10 years back, and what they could be doing today. But, understanding that this is going to be the practical side of things, not just some random fancy technology that is probably going to be proven in 2050, that is probably not proven today. I, as a CFO, would not be cutting that check.
Well, Sam, to be fair, you might not cut that check, but the next CFO would, and they would make billions of dollars. And that's the interesting thing about when you say practical and conservative, right?
Yeah.
Because what happens a lot of times is we stay so practical that we lose out on the creativity. And I've found this is my perspective of growing and being absolutely impractical in a practical world. Almost all successes, if you go throughout history, if you go through the Google searches right now and you find what's the greatest success stories, it's that practical person that jumped into an impractical idea and it blew up. And does that mean that there were failures several times before that? Yeah, likely, very likely. One of the great stories, I think, and we talk about this guy far too much, is Elon Musk.
Yeah.
You think about the failures he had over and over and over again and the impractical way he went about business and what's exploded now. So I just want to take that small topic and say, I know that we have a lot of left-brained people, a lot of analytical, practical, conservative minds. We need that for sure. But one thing I preach in business all the time is let's not forget about our right brain. Let's not forget about that creativity. Let's not forget about that what if. What if we do write that check? And I know a lot of us watch Shark Tank and they'll go, oh, that idea is not going to work. And then they step off of Shark Tank and the idea blows up. And it has, that practical mind shut down and created a limited perspective. So going back to your actual, let's focus on the manufacturing industry, manufacturing engineering. The first place I ever started, and it was way back in 1999, was a fantastic precious metals facility. And what we did there is we received all sorts of precious metals from around the world. And you can think of gold, platinum, silver, palladium. The neat thing about this place was that it was its own refining plant, and it would take that melted down, whatever it might be, and then we would turn it into something. So there were all the departments around the building, whether it be earrings or it was called the findings department, but it was just quite literally just rolled out thin wire that somebody would clip and use in one way or another. There's different areas for jewelry. The department I ran was the anniversary band and wedding band department. So we had a lot of machines there. But anything that has to do with jewelry, including laying in the stones for the stones that go along with it. Obviously, diamonds is the one we think of most, right? But then there was also injection molding. So we were creating our own unique designs. There was the tumbling department, obviously, for polishing. There was hand deburring and hand polishing as well. I mean, it was all inclusive. It really was, from receiving a piece of almost junk material. It wasn't junk because it had good quality to it. And sometimes it was pure, and sometimes it was pure. So we didn't have to stress about it, all the way to the finished goal where we're working with the most elite jewelry companies that I could, name drop if I was doing some shameless name dropping right now, that I could name drop around the world that we know very well from the beginning process to the end process. So I ended up over time running a department there called the anniversary band department. But to be fair, and what I think gives great insight is because this was my first real job outside of being a lifeguard or working at Pizza Hut in college or these types of, growing pains that we all have. Although, to be fair, a lifeguard was an awesome job. I had the great privilege to start on a machine where you quite literally put your right hand on one button, your left hand on another button. This was for security measures when both buttons are pushed with both hands, which allows you to keep all the digits on your fingers instead of cutting them off. A piece of plexiglass would slide down on this machine to protect us again. And a big metal rod would come down and punch a hole into a flat, thin plate of whatever precious metal, gold, platinum, silver, whatever it might be. So that was the start. I'm going to take a breath and allow you to ask me whatever questions you'd like from that before I move into the process of all the other aspects of this company. But that was the starting point of this really great, intuitive, well-oiled machine where I started there.
Yeah. So, very interesting story. And thanks for all of those details. They're really helping us out in terms of the kind of manufacturing situation that you have had. And now, from our perspective, what we are looking to see is to find out some of the lessons learned based on your engagements, right? So in this specific situation, let's say if I ask you, and you were talking about comfort zone, right? So let's define the comfort zone. So let's say if I am the manufacturing CFO and I am trying to run my jewelry business here, what is going to be a comfort zone for me? Can you describe the comfort zone, let's say in 10 years back when you were actually leading this business, and what is going to be comfort zone? Because comfort zone is also a moving target in my experience. Right?
Isn't that the truth, Sam? So comfort zone would be, there are 50 machines in this department. These 50 machines have been used for 20 years. Well, we know what happens to technology over a 20-year time span. But we're in our comfort zone. The machines are doing their job. They're doing the work they're supposed to do. We're comfortable with what they're doing. We know the process. We don't need to create any new designs because, to be fair, most of us around the world are wearing the same more or less design of that one wedding band on our one finger all the time. That's comforting. That's the part that we know day in and day out for over 100 years with small adaptations that this company, I believe, started around 1918. 1918. So they had this comfort level. And if you look around the entire shop, almost everything, had machines that were almost as old as the company. This is comfort. This is old presses. This is a tool and die department where we're still allowing, everything to be done manually by hand. We know what we're going to create. We know what's happening. But then a younger generation came in and said, you know what? Let's do more. Let's create the idea that we can produce things faster, more creatively. Why not launch something that no one's ever seen before? Why not get these approved by these jewelry industries? Why not bring in injection molding? And for those people listening who don't know what injection molding is, there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but the mold itself can be different materials. It can be a plastic, it can be an aluminum, it can be a steel. But what it is typically a creative design where a hot liquid, which ends up hardening on the inside, forms to the design of the mold. And in doing so, that's what creates our plastic bottles out there and, everything around the world, right? Whatever it might be. But in this case, it's jewelry. So we started to get more creative. Now we're putting our big toe into the water of leaving that comfort zone. It's just the big toe, but we're starting. It's been since 1918. It's that comfort that's going on. Well, now we're buying new machines. Now we're doing things faster. And not only that, but over this time span, the majority of the machined products here, I would make the discussion, were standard in the sense of gold. What kind of gold? 14 karat, 18 karat. We get real familiar with that. We repeat that process. We have brass, we have copper. Most people don't wear brass, but it exists there. We have copper, we have silver. Well, then platinum got really popular really fast, and yet nobody knew how to machine it, because even though in our heads we think, oh, it's platinum, it's a hard material, we put it on our fingers, no big deal. Well, guess what? It's not hard. It's actually soft. and full of gritty materials that tear apart diamond tools. So, oh my gosh, we have all of these older machines. How do we adapt to this? And not only that, we got countries calling us like Australia going, no, I don't want 14 karat. I don't want 18 karat. I actually want a 9 karat gold. Oh, and next year, I want a 12 karat gold with a bit of pink in there, which is going to be that copper to give it a pink hue. Now we're leaving the comfort zone in all sorts of places. So what do we do? You know what I mean? So this is what's going on in this company. And not only that, not only all of these complications that come along with the investment of new machines to go faster, the new concepts of our metallurgists having to figure out how to manipulate and adapt to different carats of gold and different incorporations of palladium with more nickel in the material to create this, whatever it might be. And this platinum that's ripping apart the hardest material that we know, which is diamond. How do we adapt to that? Not only all these things, but as a growing company, we then have to adapt to something like a Six Sigma or a lean manufacturing or a 5S, because as we grow, if we don't do it in an efficient way, then everything's a chaotic mess, right? So we actually brought in this software called I Think software. Okay. And I had the great pleasure to be the one in charge of this software, to be the one to run it, to have a 12-week course, only 1 day per week, but a 12-week course of understanding how to actually activate almost like a two-dimensional AutoCAD video game type of thing. But if you picture Six Sigma being on the wall right now, or lean manufacturing being on the wall right now, well, take those flow charts, put them into calculus and trigonometry and geometry and all of these things, and it helps you figure out where my bottlenecks are through manufacturing, where my bottlenecks are financially. Am I investing in the right parts that allow me to make more money, or am I losing money in certain areas by allowing myself to leave that comfort zone that we're talking about? Did I lose money by making that choice? So all of these adaptations are constantly going on within this industry. And there are so many stories. I'll give you another one, Sam. And I know I'm a bit long-winded because I like
go
to go
ahead,
back.
Please. Keep going. You are doing good.
Because I like to go back and forth on these podcasts, but just another one of those situations where it's that adaptation to leave that comfort zone, to have the courage to say yes, right? This company is a global leader in the ability to be all inclusive, from melting something down to turning it into whatever we wanted to turn it into, right? With a lot of really old school machinery and the investment in new machinery and the constant adaptation to this. Well, Discovery Channel came in. Okay. Discovery Channel, apparently somebody had somewhat recently at that time found, and I'm going to get this number wrong because it's been a decade or so now, but I'm going to get close, I promise you. Found around $10 million worth of gold brick from a sunken ship, like a sunken ship that came over from Europe off of the coast of Carolina, where all of those pirates and stuff were for so many years, right? And we lost so much treasure into the ocean from storms and pirates and whatever it might be. But this $10 million of gold brick, and I saw this cart full of gold brick, and I was pushing the cart around, and it was heavier than it's heavy. Let's put it that way. If it didn't have wheels, I couldn't pick it up. And Discovery Channel came in and they said to our full team, to all of the head people, including myself, they said, we want to melt some of this down and turn it into commemorative coins to commemorate the ship that sank, right? We want to commemorate the ship. So at this point you go, well, holy, blank choice word, bleep, that kind of thing, right? Holy bleep. And you go, well, we have to create the dyes. We have to create the design. We have to create the harder materials that's going to create the stamp. We got to be confident enough of ourselves to melt down history and turn it into something, right? So we ended up saying yes, and we didn't turn all of it into gold coin, but we turned a lot of it into gold coin to commemorate. And it was a process. And Discovery Channel came through. They filmed the entire thing. We talked about what we were doing step by step. The metallurgists in the back are incredible because they can take dirt and dust out of what we used to call MFG, which is pretty much just a mix of material. And how do you break apart the pieces that say, okay, 5% is platinum, 20% is gold, 3% is nickel. The rest of it's absolutely crap because somebody swept it off of a floor and put it all together like a dummy. Like, don't do that. Separate the parts. But we got a lot of, so the metallurgists in the back, incredible. We had a guy come over, a good friend of mine to this day, actually, from England, who studied metallurgy for the longest time, who we all came together and figured out how to make this work. And at the end of the day, that was such a financially, and I would say ego is the wrong word, but it definitely boosted who we felt we were, and we were humbled by the opportunity that we were gifted to be the ones to create that type of project. But had we not taken many opportunities prior to that, to be the leader and the forefront of this technology, by accepting that even though nobody else is doing this, and maybe they won't be for 5 or 10 years, we're going to do it now. And we're going to be the leaders of that now. That's what created these type of opportunities to do these type of tasks.
Okay, amazing. Amazing. Love both of these stories, by the way. And I am actually going to, connect some of the dots to make sure that, we are going to go back to our conversation, whatever we were talking about, and that was slightly more comfort zone, right? So when we spoke about the first story, obviously you had the old machines. I get it. Sometimes it's going to be harder to change unless the financial executives are going to see a clear value in terms of, how that is going to result in something concrete that is going to bring some dollars to the company. I understand the second opportunity as well. I know that a lot of companies need to be leaders, but there can be only a couple of leaders. Everybody cannot be leaders. So it's your choice in terms of the business model, whether you want to be the leader. And being a leader is expensive as well. It's not inexpensive to be a leader, right? So let's go back to the last story that you had mentioned. In that you had mentioned you had slightly more conservative guys. They were trying to run the old machines. They were trying to run the old business model. The new kids are always going to have brilliant ideas. There's no question about that. But obviously they are not going to have as much experience and seeing the financial results before actually trying their hands on something. Okay. So their ideas are great, but obviously they don't have as much experience in taking things from point A to point B. So again, going back to the practical side of things and thinking this holistically and how we can do something that is going to make slightly more financial sense to make sure we are innovating, but we are not trying to change the entire company. That is going to be a crazy idea, right? So let's say if you were the CEO or the CFO of the organization, what would be your approach in breaking that comfort zone? And I don't know what was the underlying reason for the comfort zone. Was this purely the mindset in this specific case, or they just didn't worry about it? They were growing enough. They had enough business coming in. So then they didn't have to worry about changing the machine. What was the underlying reason, number one, for the comfort zone? And what you could have done, let's say, if you were the leader in the business as of today, to remove that comfort zone and bring in new blood, but more from the practical sense?
Well, there's so many answers to that, Sam. Holy cow. Firstly, sometimes experience can lead to suffocation because we know the most and nobody can teach us anything, right? And that's suffocation. And secondly, you're right. If you can't change it all overnight, because even if we did everything in the most successful way overnight, it would still fail because no one's trained. It's just not how it works. Exactly. It doesn't. So that's why I mentioned the big toe being tipped in, right? So here was what we did. And I did become that leader because of that adaptation and maybe my stubbornness as well, right? But here's what we did. Instead of investing in 50 new machines, we invested in 2 new machines. Okay. How quickly are those machines going to pay themselves off? What's the ROI? How many more products did we get out of it? How precise were those products? What was the uptime of the machine running versus the uptime of the older machines running? If I'm running 80% of the time and I'm getting twice as many products out, then obviously my ROI is going to be better than something that's slower. What's the precision of the new machine? Does the precision of the new machine create less polishing at the end of the day, less tumbling, less measurements of everything? Am I going to have to put a secondary operation to clean something off where I can do it the first time? So all of these little pieces of the puzzle that go to that ROI have to be tested, of course. So one investment in an expensive machine that we've done the research on, that everyone is trained, you see how it works. If it works, which most likely it would, you rinse and repeat. You say that worked. Cool. What's the next step? But also, in addition to the machinery upgrades, instead of having the 50-year-old machines, the 60-year-old machines, there's the idea that we can create new designs. Well, what does that cost me? Well, I have my own refining plant. So as long as I keep my materials separated, as long as I'm not mixing up my gold and my platinum and my silver and running a bunch of different materials on a machine and forgetting to clean up the machines, if I specifically pick one of my less expensive materials that I'm not going to rip apart my tooling on, that's going to be, almost the longevity of the tooling is going to cost me almost nothing as well. And it's like a practice run. What do? Well, I put someone, which they chose me, but I put someone like myself or another genuine guy who was much older than me, who was going to retire soon, who had all the wisdom in the world, who I was so grateful to learn from. You put us together. Okay, now let's create some designs. Let's take that machine, put in the G codes, the M codes, which is programming language for CNC machines. And for people out there listening, a CNC machine is old school machine with a computer attached to it. It stands for computer numerical control. But what do? You put these people together and you say, more or less, have fun, have at it. When you're done after a day, a week, a month, whatever it might be, bring those processes to us, bring those new designs. We'll figure out what we like and what we don't like, what the customer doesn't like. So none of this is happening overnight, Sam, but it does happen. And so this is how we, without investing tons of money, we take the existing professionals that we have, the wisdom and experience of the older generation combined with the creativity and the excitement of the younger generation. You put it together. We ended up in like a month's time creating about 20 new designs by changing the programs and the way curves worked in the design itself through these machines. And me personally, I didn't have my name on it, but the company itself during that short amount of time had 6 new patents on new designs for jewelry. So we're constantly talking about the comfort zone, leaving the comfort zone, being conservative, being practical, not stretching ourselves, but it all has to go together. It doesn't mean that if we can't swim, we jump off of the boat in the middle of the ocean, but maybe it means we put on water wings and jump into the deep end of the pool, right? We can still float a little bit. We can still play that game, right? So that's what we did. And it was constant adaptation. And if I may add to this, which wasn't done at the jewelry industry, but because I wasn't there, but it was done at a place recently. And I did this amazing interview. And they had old stamping machines, these machines easily somewhere between 40, 50, 60 years old, right? And this place has been around since 1914, I want to say. Oh, wow. Such an old machine. It's an old company, and they're based in Chicago. Really, really a great company. And their number one competition based on what they do is not rocket science. It's a repeated process with stamping machines that create millions of parts every year. And they go on to, door handles of trucks or whatever it might be, right? So when we think about that concept, who's the biggest competitor of that? Obviously, it's China. China can typically do it with less of a wage and with more people. You can throw more people at it, in which case I can sell my product for less. Well, what did this company do? Well, they partnered with an automation company, a robotic company, and now all of these older stamping machines are going to be implemented with robots, which means the humans no longer have to be, surrounded by a dangerous activity where their fingers might get hurt, where they're sucking in fumes where they don't want to. And not only that, the robots will work 3 shifts and not just 1 shift. They don't take breaks. And the people that are no longer on the machines, they're not losing their jobs. They weren't replaced by a robot. They then got to learn more, meaning they got to learn how to program the robot. They got to go to another department and learn something more. All that happened was they were removed from a mundane, repetitive, mostly times dangerous situation. They let a robot take care of that. So what we're doing now is, to bring this full circle, Sam, is we took old machinery, which I was very familiar with at the jewelry company, and applied modern adaptations to it to allow it to create more over and over and over again, and allow us to get back to the things we truly love.
Okay, amazing. Love both stories. Again, they are so fascinating. Obviously, the kind of details that you are able to provide, my listeners must be thinking, oh, wow, Tony is awesome. Okay, so now we are actually going to go back to those stories again. So in your case, when I look at, again, I'm thinking more from the CFO of the manufacturing organization perspective. So you are talking about a jewelry industry. Obviously, jewelry industry is very unique. You have the customer experience factor on your product, and you need to be innovating. And if you don't, then obviously nobody is going to be buying your jewelry and you are going to be out of your business. In my opinion, old machinery is not the driver. The real driver is that you have to keep innovating your products, because that is driven by the consumer demands, because that actually people are buying and they always want the fresh and new stuff. Now let's talk about rest of the manufacturing. You mentioned the other example of the stamping, which was great as well. But let's say if I am the manufacturer of some sort, I'm probably supplying to automotive, I am probably supplying to my aerospace, and I am a part that is going in either automotive or I am going in aerospace. In that case, if I actually make a case to my CFO, hey, we need to replace these old machines because we just need to be innovative. That's not going to fly very well, to be honest. Okay. But we both know that there has to be a change. The comfort zone needs to change. So what are going to be the underlying drivers in your experience? Let's say if you talk about these industries that are not going to be customer experience driven, they are going to be slightly more back office centric, as I like to define from the manufacturing value chain perspective. So what would be some of the underlying drivers, in your opinion, that should drive this change, and not just the replace old machine, replace machine with robot, or replace humans with robot? Those are not the drivers. There have to be a real business drivers. So in your experience, what are those real business drivers that manufacturing companies should be thinking as of today?
It's easy, Sam. And all the things you mentioned are the leaders of what's driving it, only we didn't specifically say it, right? When we talk about the robots and the machines, ultimately, it's about making money. It's about making customers happy. It's about shortening lead times. It's about being able to grow by putting out more product. From a CEO perspective, right? From the ownership perspective, everything we just talked about with the machines and the updates of the machines. I gave you those perspectives from the shop floor of what it did for the employees, because I think CEOs should value their employees. A company is nothing without their employees, right? So, but from an ownership perspective, let's follow the money. Let's follow the fact that more happy partners, more happy customers mean more orders. Let's talk about that, right? So I'm going to go back to the machines, but I will now explain it from why, as a CEO, I want to invest in this. If I have and I'm going to give you a couple of examples as well. I went to a company just recently and they invested in a new machine. This new machine, based on the adaptation and the ownership invested in this new machine, because they were able to produce the same amount of runtime hours on that machine in 9 months that they were able to produce in 5 years on their previous machine. As an owner, you want to tell me that it's not worth an investment that I can do in 9 months, the same thing I could do in 5 years? Of course. I now have shorter lead times for my customers, which means I can take new customers on. Not only did that machine help with the overall hours being produced in a similar fashion in that 9 months, because it was able to run so much, it put out more parts. Because it was a higher quality machine, it was able to have better precision. Well, what does better precision do? It allows me to have less work in my measurement department. It allows me less setup times. So all of this from the CEO's perspective says, okay, look, you mean to tell me that the same part I was making, I can now make in less time with less work. And not only that, I get to go home after an 8-hour shift. And then when I come in tomorrow, I have 24 hours worth of work that's finished. What? Are you kidding me right now? And then on top of that, a same company makes aerospace parts, right? When I think of aerospace parts, sometimes I think of like a drone wing or something, right? Well, they invested in a machine that had 41 feet of travel. Well, what does that 41 feet of travel do? As an owner, what does that do? Why would I invest in something like that? I'll tell you why. Because as an owner, I know that previously I had put that same part. Let's say that wing is 40 feet because I have a 41-foot maximum now. That
Yeah.
wing is 40 feet, right? Well, previously I had to make that in 4 or 5 segments, put it together like a puzzle piece. And in
Yeah.
doing that in 4 or 5 segments, maybe I'm not as accurate. I
Yeah.
know it takes more time. I know it takes more setups. I
Yeah.
know it takes more machines. Now I'm making one wing in one part. That puzzle piece is no longer a puzzle piece. It's one altogether. As a CEO, I'm looking at both of these projects and going, why didn't I do this earlier? The machine paid for itself in less than a year.
Yeah.
So now I paid no money on that. Everything becomes profit. I'm bringing in more customers. I'm bringing in more precision. And overall, it allows me to expand my portfolio on what I'm able to create because I'm not like the other guys out there anymore. I don't bid on the same, little pieces that anyone can do. I can now go to a CEO at another company, a CFO at another company, whoever it might be, look them straight in the eye and go, yeah, that guy you're working with, I can do it better, faster, stronger. You know what I mean? Like the Kanye West song pops into my head. but that's what comes in is I know now for a fact that I can do this and my machines are paid off. So what do I get to do now? I get to expand further. I can take my real estate further and go into something else. Now I'm taking eggs as a CEO and putting them in multiple baskets. Now I'm not limited to 1 or 2 companies. I can spread where I want to spread and do what I want to do. And the greatest companies in manufacturing across the board are doing this. By investing in this type of technology, we are investing in ourselves and the longevity. I had another friend just recently tell me, he said, my dad owns the company and I buy machines for my grandkids because I want my company to be around that long. And he goes, and I don't even have kids yet. So he's like, I'm not even married yet. So the grandkids he's talking about, they don't even exist. But he's thinking so far in the future, that 20 years we talked about at the very beginning of this, because he did buy into that. And he's the guy that's machining beryllium, one of the most difficult products on this planet to machine that is quite literally poisonous to a lot of people to breathe in, that goes into the satellites that are around the planet right now, the most sophisticated working with NASA parts. Yet he wouldn't be there if he didn't invest in something that no one else would catch on to for the next 20 years. And they're a global leader as well. If not the number one company in the country based out of LA, one of the top 2 or 3.
Okay, amazing stories there. So let's talk about some of the people who are not thinking about their grandkids and not really innovating. What are their challenges? I mean, why are they not thinking? What do you see? Do you have any specific trends when you talk to these manufacturers? What are the specific issues? Why are they not innovating? Why are not they thinking ahead?
Oh man, Sam, it's a great question. And the answer is multifaceted. Sometimes people are just comfortable. Sometimes people don't want the complications of the growth. Okay. Sometimes people don't want to have 100 employees. They like having 1 or 2 or 5 or just working for themselves. Or, sometimes it's not communicated effectively enough for people to see that $5 million price tag. They go, wait, for $5 million, I can buy 20 of these other machines at the same cost without realizing that $5 million machine is going to pay off quicker than just one of the 50,000 or 100,000. It's going to have the same return on investment based on what it's able to produce. So I think there's just oftentimes it's either a miseducation, a fear, going back full circle to that comfort zone again, or the thought that we already know the answers and we're going to keep going in the direction we're going without allowing outside sources to manipulate our thought process because we know the answer. We've gone to universities. We have doctorate degrees. We've owned this business for 40 years now and we're doing just fine. But because it worked for the last 20 years is one of the most dangerous statements we can say. That's one of the most dangerous things we can do for even just the now, because if we're not moving forward, everyone else is. If we're comfortable with where we are, we're actually falling behind. We must continue to do that. But I think it's multifaceted into the reason why people don't. Sometimes it's finances. Sometimes it's the fear of it. There's companies out there that will help us grow if we wish to do it. But I honestly think it's, miseducation, a very focused direction on what we know to be right, or a comfort zone to remove ourselves from the comfort zone is often the times why we don't do it.
Okay, amazing. So that's it for today, Tony. Do you have any last minute closing thoughts or remarks for our listeners?
I don't know, Sam. I feel like I'm out of breath from all the stories I've shared already, so kind of I guess what I'd like to finish with is kind of back to that last statement. And as you know me, and I work with MTD CNC, and we're a marketing channel and a news channel. The most popular news media marketed channel in the world for the world of engineering and manufacturing. And for those out there who are listening, mtdcnc.com, super easy to find. There's tons of videos there if you're interested in learning more. Going back to that part about either having the fear, being miseducated, or just not knowing about the products at all, not knowing that they even exist, right? And then that one statement that I made about already knowing, hey, I have a master's degree, I have a doctorate's degree, I've been doing this for so long. There's nobody smarter than me. There can't be people smarter than me, right? But obviously there are. But the mindset is sometimes there. We build a wall in front of ourselves, and that wall doesn't allow all information to come in because we believe that somebody's coming in not because they care about who we are in our business, but to sell us something and make themselves successful, right? So what MTD does oftentimes is we'll go into a customer and we share their testimonial about how they've created success. And we also record with not just the people on the shop floor, but the CEOs. How did they create success through the investments that they made? And we do that from a perspective that is completely non-agenda driven, meaning psychologically, most people immediately move their walls and those barriers they built of the sales guys coming in. And that's why MTD and the media we do is significant, because now the people are receiving the information from a company that places themselves like Switzerland, where they love everyone in the industry and go, this is what someone else has done, and we just want to educate you. And in doing so, psychologically, we then absorb the information more. We're grateful for that information, and it allows us a quicker time to implement it into our facility without negotiating with the voices in our head that say, they're just out to get me. They just want to sell me something. No, these are pure, authentic, real, true stories, and that's why it works great.
Yeah, I completely agree. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be, there are always going to be bad apples in the community. There is always going to be situations where, there's somebody who just screwed up. But that does not mean that you should not be listening to people. You should not be using your judgment to break that comfort zone and try newer ideas. If you don't try, obviously, you are not going to get anywhere. On that note, Tony, I really want to thank you for your time. This was a powerful episode, sir.
It's absolutely my pleasure, Sam. And if we've never tasted a bad apple, how do we know what a good apple tastes like?
Exactly. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cheers, brother. Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Cheers, my friend. I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Tony, head over to mtdcnc.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Jennifer Bannock-Bloomer, who discusses how machines think and why that matters to the machine shops. Also, the interview with Joe Sullivan from Gorilla 76, who touches on growth from the perspective of marketing and why COVID offers an excellent opportunity to reinvest their marketing budget reserved for in-person events to other digital channels. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.